also apologize. I have a commitment at 8:30 in Shondam, and I'm going to have to leave here at 8, which means I'm chickening out of the Q&A. I wish I could stay. I love a good fight, but...
Thank you. Next, we're going to have speakers speak very briefly on issues that Save the Lakes is concerned about in terms of what the developer has promised and what we think the reality might be. The first issue is jobs, and Chris Bell will speak to that.
I'm just going to start with a technical note to my friend over here. When you see me turn a page, that means I'm ready for the next slide.
Great.
Okay. Did anybody here, when you were a little kid, you ever want a puppy?
Yeah.
When you wanted the puppy, you built a story and you took it to your parents and you told them all the good things that having a puppy would bring to the family. And if there were some things you knew that were not so great about having a puppy, you probably tried to downplay those a little bit. We all do this. It's perfectly natural. We're going to talk about hype versus reality. And so I'm going to say some things about what HRVR has represented and versus what our view of those things are. Morka, if you could bring down this light and leave the back one up, I would appreciate it. You can kill this one completely. I can still see. I'm going to talk about jobs. I think everybody's pretty interested in jobs. In January, Hudson Valley unemployment was at 7.9%. That's not good. It was at 7.9% last January as well. Two kinds of jobs involved with this project: construction jobs and operational jobs. I'm going to talk first about construction jobs. The HRVR website, the materials that they've mailed out to the community, and the DEIS all talk about roughly 1,300 jobs. What you have to understand is they are not talking about jobs in the same sense that many of us understand that word. They are talking about something called full-time equivalents. It's a perfectly legitimate measure, but it's generally used by management and by accountants to understand what their costs are going to be like. One full-time equivalent job is one person working full-time for 1 year. Another way to say that is 2,000 hours of labor, more or less. It doesn't mean that what you're offering is one person working full-time for 1 year. You might have two people each working half-time for 1 year. Still 2,000 hours, still one full-time equivalent. So you have to be very careful when you read documents that talk about full-time equivalents. It may mean something very different to your family, if you're working that job, than it does to the accountant and to the manager. They came up with 13,000 hours, or 13,000 jobs. Another thing about full-time equivalents is they change at the end of every year. So if I work full-time for 2 years, that's 2 full-time equivalents. We might not think of that as being 2 jobs. But to get to 1,300 jobs, you have to count the job each year in which it occurs. Now, they do acknowledge in some places, not everywhere, that averages out to about 136 jobs in 1 year at any one time. We believe that number is inflated as well. I'll tell you why in a minute. They got these numbers by calculating backwards from what it costs to build their project. And they looked up statistical records of how much labor you can get for $1,000 in the construction field. And they went back to some numbers that were compiled by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. I didn't even know we had one of those, but they're probably the people who keep track of how many jobs we can create in the federal government. In fact, that program was started in 1929 as a result of the Depression. They wanted to understand how much federal works projects would generate in the way of jobs. One of the characteristics of the program, unfortunately, is they didn't care where the jobs were. So although they made some distinctions, they counted all of the jobs, not just the jobs in the local community. And this is where we think there's a problem. About half of the jobs that are calculated using this method will not be in the local community. And the reason is explained in this quote at the bottom, which is buried in one of the appendices in the DEIS. The DEIS is 7,650 pages of text. But they don't mention this in the DEIS report itself, which is only 650 of those pages. Because more and more construction material is manufactured, shingles, windows, appliances, flooring, somewhere other than the job site, that's where those jobs are. They're somewhere else. In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, even 50s and 60s, it was at least somewhere else in the United States. Now it could be in another country. So when you allow for the fact that about half of your cost of building something goes into materials which are probably not manufactured in the local area, you understand that the numbers drop considerably. And in this case, it comes out to about half, which means if you were to go to the job site anytime during the 10 years, on average, you would find 68 people working. That's a far cry from 1,300, hype versus reality. Let's look at construction wages very briefly. According to their figures again, the average wage is about $38,000. It's going to vary quite a lot. The construction trades, there's a lot of variation depending on which trade you're in, what the skill level required is. They do acknowledge that they will consider union employment. We're competitive. You've probably heard that before if you're in a union. Operation job numbers. Again, they say 300. In some places they say 300 jobs, but again, they mean 300 full-time equivalents. Yes, some will be full-time jobs. Some are acknowledged to be part-time jobs. Many are left in a kind of amorphous category where they'll either be full or part-time, but we don't know how many in each category. That 300 number is valid in the 5th year after the project starts, when the hotel is believed to be at full capacity, however that is defined. The hotel doesn't even go into operation until the 3rd year, and at that point, they estimate that they will need only half of this number of jobs to get started. Here are the operation wages. You can just look at these numbers. These are the averages of numbers that are in the DEIS for the full-time jobs, the part-time jobs, and those amorphous jobs that fall into either or both of those categories. At the end of the meeting tonight, there will be some handouts on the back table. There's a green handout that addresses some more comments about jobs. I urge you to pick it up and read it. Thank you.